Welcome to the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Today is Wednesday, October 23rd. Guess whose birthday it is?
Ryan Reynolds.
It is Ryan Reynolds' birthday, but do you know whose birthday it also is? It's Weird Al's birthday as well.
They share the same birthday?
They do share the same birthday. October 23rd, also the same day that Apple released the iPod back in 2001. That's just some interesting bit of trivia. Before we start the show, Hysteria is a new horror series on Peacock. All 8 episodes were released October 18th. It's set in 1989 in a little town called Happy Hollow. It's fictional, of course, but it's based in Michigan, the same place where both the show creator and the show's director for the first episode were from. The plot revolves around a nerdy high schooler in a heavy metal band who becomes a little too intent on pretending to be a Satanist in order to impress a girl that he likes. Stop me if I get any of this wrong.
Okay.
At the same time, his parents, the schools, the church, and the whole community have grown concerned at the mysterious Satanist rhetoric that seems to be absorbing the youth after the golden boy of the town, the quarterback, goes missing and is later found dead.
Ryan. Yeah.
Ryan is his name.
Yep.
And he's dead by the first episode.
Yes. Does this remind you even the littlest bit of Deathgasm? That movie that came out in like 2015.
And the reason it would remind me of that is because
it's a horror comedy, but also it deals with a Satanist band.
A metal band. In
yeah,
specifically.
I mean...
just like Todd in the Book of Pure Evil, right?
Yes.
The whole basis of that show is that he wants, I think in the first episode, to do like some sort of shredding on the guitar and ends up winning because he finds a book that helps him. In this, it's a little less made up. Like he's the main character. What's his name?
Dylan.
Okay, Dylan. And his band decide we're going to lean heavy into the metal part of our band atmosphere. We're going to put on the makeup. We're going to throw this huge party. And then by the end of the day, they're the biggest kids in school, except there are still some people who don't believe that they're actually Satanists, right?
Yep. And
so he's approached at the end of that party and he's told that he must kill a cat in front of the girl that he likes. And the girl that he likes turns around and says what?
She says, do it. I want to see you do it. I
What's
want
her
you
name?
to kill it. Her name's Judith.
Judith. And what'd you think of Judith?
I thought that she's actually one of the more interesting characters in the TV series.
Right. Usually the love interest isn't the one compelling the person to do the bad thing.
I was glad it wasn't like a twist that they waited later in the season. It was like, no, we see from the first episode that even when he's like slicing his hand, she is really into it for some reason.
The first scene you see with her, they do a lot of lens flares and like the 80s type of he's in love with her,
yes.
The music in the background. And so he sees her at the locker and he says her name and she completely ignores him, slams the locker and walks away. And that's when I was like, there was no guilt in her eyes. And so that's usually a dead giveaway that she's not going to be a good love interest. She's going to be the guy the girl that he is preoccupied with at first. But by the end of the series, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with Jordy. Who is
well, that's what they're hinting at, throughout the whole
I don't even think
episode.
they've hinted at it yet, though.
I mean, Jordy telling him that he has a good heart, 40 minutes into the episode, I'm pretty sure that that's a hint.
All right. Well, let's talk before we actually get into who plays who and stuff like that. I went onto your IMDb page and I saw what movies you had rated, horror movies. And you've only rated 5 of them.
You saw my IMDb. You went onto my IMDb.
I wanted to see how you rated horror movies.
I don't think I've used IMDb in a while.
Okay. Can you remember any of the 5 that you've rated?
I think I maybe get 3. Let's see.
Off the top of your head.
I think Cabin in the Woods I gave like a 10 to.
No.
No?
No Cabin in the Woods. The Thing, Alien.
Okay. The Thing I gave a 7 to, and Alien I gave a 7 to.
Alien you gave an 8 to.
I gave an 8 to? Oh, okay.
And then the final 3, The Menu.
9. Did I give it a 9?
8.
8.
Godzilla -1.
8.
Kind of a stretch to call that a horror movie, but yes. And then Psycho.
Psycho I gave a 9 to.
Psycho is your highest rated horror film. Is there a reason for that?
Well, spoiler alert for Psycho, but they kill off the character midway through, and that was the first time I had ever seen that really done in a horror film, because I watched it back when I was in high school, and then the mystery, especially by the end.
Misdirection.
Yes, because, I mean, Alfred Hitchcock is known for MacGuffins, and that's where a movie starts out, and you think it's going to go one way, and then completely derails and goes a different route.
It's a normal horror trope. In almost every one of these other movies, Godzilla -1, there is a misdirection with some of the main characters. I don't want to spoil things. The Menu absolutely.
Yes, right. It's always the midpoint, and I know specifically with Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock made it where he wouldn't allow people. He would ask movie theaters to not allow people in who had come late.
Yeah.
He made it where it was like even if you were 10 minutes late, you would have to catch the next
Well,
showing.
I think it was back then, movies used to just play the movie constantly, so people could buy a ticket at the beginning of the day and then like go back later in the day, and it would just play on repeat without people having like to come back in. Like you wouldn't
Right.
have to buy tickets every single time. You just keep on walking in there. And this was the first time where it was like, no, you have a block, and so you can't just go in there whenever.
He would put
because
up
he wanted
he
people
put
to
up
be
a
spared.
cutout of himself, and it was like, sorry, you have to wait till the next showing of this.
That's cool. I'd never even heard of that. So transitioning over to Hysteria, it's set in the Satanic Panic, which technically went from the very early 1980s, a release of one specific book, until the end of the 1980s. And this is based in 1989. So I was a little surprised why the town wouldn't have already been affected by a lot of what's going on. And the reason why we know it's 1989, besides the giant
1989 at the beginning.
is that because they say Sleepaway 3 has just come out, and the main actors are wondering if they should go head over to that.
Right, because Linda in this show, that's Dylan's mom,
Played by Claire Dunphy.
played by Julie Bowen.
Yes.
It seems like this is the first time that she's learning about it. Like she's getting very scared about it, but like you're saying, she would have already known if this was something that took place in the early 80s.
Yeah, some things that you might not know about the Satanic Panic. It led to vigilante parents digging up under a preschool, searching for secret tunnels. Household goods company Procter & Gamble had to make a public statement that their profits were not being used to support devil worship. And Tom Hanks actually starred in a TV movie, this is before he took off as an actor, about the dangers of Dungeons and Dragons. It was called like
what?
Mazes and something else, but like the whole idea was that there was a kid who got depressed enough that he was playing this role play game with these other friends, and they all got stuck in that, and then they ended up dying because of it. And the whole idea was just 60 Minutes did that whole thing about Dungeons and Dragons. And Stranger Things, they've made fun of the fact that Dungeons and Dragons was used as the scapegoat. And
That's
so was
always
Metal
it's
Gear.
always going to confuse me, just how especially such a game like that can be like twisted into being something so nefarious and like evil.
And I have to think that's part of the reason why the same production company behind Dungeons and Dragons, the movie with Chris Pine,
Yeah.
is doing this show, Hysteria. And it sort of follows this ostracism from the community theme that I've seen in the last couple of years with horror shows, whether it be from Agatha, where they're talking about the witches in Salem, or Them, where it's a race-based thing back in the 50s and 60s.
Right, when they had to move.
When African Americans were coming into suburban communities, and it was causing a stir, and people were going a little nuts. The hysteria here, the idea of like people sticking razors into the candy at Halloween, all that stuff, like, you know, things blown out of proportion to a certain extent.
And by the way, they keep going. I remember even when I was a kid back in like the 2000s, they were always scared, and schools were always telling you, inspect all the candy you get, make sure that they're not like putting in drugs or something. Because
and what does it end up always doing? It always takes the unpopular group or the misrepresented group, and it makes them the villains.
Right.
So Dylan Campbell, Jordy, and Spud are this trio of outcasts already. They're not very popular in their school, and they're in this metal band called Death Crunch. And they decide, we're going to own this. We feel like we're the topic of conversation right now. Why not lean into it hard? You got a couple headliners here starring in the series, but you know Bruce Campbell from
Evil Dead,
of course, and then also his work with Sam Raimi in like the Spider-Man series.
Yes, I think he makes a cameo in every
Pizza
single
Balls,
one.
right? Pizza Balls. Julie Bowen, Modern Family,
Yeah.
Anna Camp, you've actually seen live before.
Yeah, I went to an advanced screening of her horror film back in 2023 from Black. And yeah, she starred in that. I think that she does a way better job in this. In fact, one of my pros was that I was glad we were able to finally see Anna Camp play evil before, because I've never actually seen in any of the stuff that she's been in. I've seen like all the Pitch Perfect movies.
She's a religious zealot named Tracy Whitehead.
I think she's supposed to be kind of the big bad of the whole series.
Her daughter is the one who ends up going missing with the quarterback at the very beginning of the episode. But we just talked about three of the older celebrities. There's actually MJ Anthony, who plays Dylan Campbell, and it's Chiara Aurelia, who plays Jordy. Both of them you probably know But I'll give you a little game with MJ's. So he was one of these is not true. Okay. He was the kid from Council of Dads. Remember that's
Oh wow, that is a
very
throwback.
long time ago.
From what I remember, I think he was.
Mowgli's the wolf pup, his friend in the Jungle Book.
Wasn't that like Gray or something?
Gray, I believe his name was. The kid from Chef.
The kid from Chef, okay.
And Bryce's little brother in 13 Reasons Why. One of those isn't true.
I don't even remember Bryce's brother from 13 Reasons Why.
You don't remember him during the trial?
No. I'll go with that.
I'll go with that one. Yeah. It was an easy game. The other one, Jordy, though, she's the main character from Cruel Summer. So I'd seen her in that. And then Tell Me Your Secrets, she also was a main character in that.
Cruel Summer, I think you could throw in it with comparisons to this. I also had Goosebumps, the movies. I already mentioned Stranger Things, School Spirits, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Spirits.
Pretty Little Liars, Original Sin. But going to the first scene of this show, I loved it. I thought the first scene was great. And I'm not just talking about the old Universal photo that they showed, which I thought was cool, but also just the way that it was filmed. It's shot exactly like the 80s.
You have to announce it like it's like a slasher scene.
Yes.
So the first one is the Scream slasher movie moment with Drew Barrymore where the villain's going to pop up and try to murder whoever.
But even the first shot where you see the lawn and it's filled with child toys and child cars.
Let's talk about that first, because the first literal moment you see the cozy coupe, which you know how many kids had a cozy coupe growing up?
I know I did.
The car's design where it has that like Volkswagen Beetle-ish Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, I was going to say Flintstone, yeah.
You got the red bottom and the yellow top. And it was actually, I think, designed in like the 50s, 60s. And it was called the world's best-selling car for much of the 90s, actually beating out the Honda Accord and Ford Taurus. Ford Taurus, not Forest Taurus. And it was only given eyes in 2009. And that was a big mistake. Because like I look at the ones from the 80s and the 90s and I'm like, that's a cool looking car for a kid. Stick the eyeballs on it, it just looks goofy. Like it looks like you're Thomas the Tank Engine. And once you're past 2 or 3, you don't want to be in that. When you're 5 years old and you don't have the eyeballs on it though, you can pop in that thing.
The originals are always what I'm going to remember the most. The red roof, the orange bottom.
I'm pretty sure we might have one in storage from like when I was a kid or something. I don't know.
But then we cut to the inside of the house and we see that Faith, she's a teenage girl.
What song is playing at this point? Heaven is a Place on Earth. It's just blaring in the background because she's like about to have sex with this.
Yeah. But then she stops like right before they're about to do it.
Yeah. Like sex education. And then they decide to have a nice little chat, right? And they're chatting about what their personalities and also what they're known for. He's known for being a Minuteman.
Yeah, even though he's like the star football player.
Right, but you have to emasculate him a bit to make him more likable, maybe.
Right.
And then give her some... show that it's not like like this is the 80s. So they have to definitely show that they're both okay with this.
And I mean, then he has to run into the closet because she's afraid. She believes that her mom has come home and we figure out it's actually murderers or it's kidnappers. We see one.
Right. That was a scary mask.
Yeah. They break in. It's one of those weird bird masks.
I've never seen that before.
But
it was definitely like a play on, we've seen Scream. We've seen like all these other ones. They become kind of cliche, Michael. But this one was certainly, when they first opened the door, I was expecting it to kill her immediately, but instead we don't see any bloodshed.
No.
They kind of just steal the kids.
And it seemed like Ryan, we're not really sure if even he dies. Because, we see
we're sure by the end of the episode.
By the end, but in the first scene, they're both knocked out and they're put in the back of the car.
Right. Despite it, I think Peacock was playing it safe. And like, this is technically, I would think, a PG type show. As dark as it gets, it's never showing you too much, you know?
Right.
They threaten to kill a cat. The worst blood we get is when he's cutting open his own hand to make a little pentagram.
And again, he's doing that to himself.
Exactly. So. And then we see Linda's character at the end sort of being possessed. She's being pulled back. This is the very end of the episode where she's being like, I don't know, an unknown force has made her levitate, Evil Dead style, but nothing too graphic, nothing too crazy or bad is happening where I would think that this is too violent.
You just mentioned my second favorite scene. And again, a pro of the show is that we're actually dealing with supernatural forces, because for a majority of the episode, it seems like we're just going to be kind of focused on this satanic panic, but we're not actually going to have any horror elements beyond maybe some slashes or some kills. But
there's no kills.
Yeah,
we aren't seeing kills.
I understand, but I'm saying that we're actually dealing with some otherworldly forces once she's being attacked.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if you look at John Hughes, the Duffer Brothers, I feel were more. I feel like the first season of Stranger Things was scarier than this, though.
Really
Right? Right?
interesting.
Do you disagree?
I
That
think
first episode where Will gets kidnapped.
I always find it a stretch to call Stranger Things a horror
By the
series.
third season, it gets really hokey and gimmicky. The first scene, it felt it had enough cheese in it. I
Yeah.
mean, it was supposed to be funny. It was supposed to be Raimi-ish. It wasn't enough Stephen King, I don't think, to like bring in the horror element where I would be afraid to show this to a middle schooler. Like it's not
So you
an R-rated horror
really thought that
series.
this was tame? Because I never got that it was like too tame.
I
Where it
felt
was
like
like
it was tricking me into trying to think it wasn't tame. It just feels like the whole town is getting caught up in things. And yes, the quarterback died, but that's all off screen. We don't get any violence. It's basically people just getting Linda's thing at the very end could all be in her head.
yeah,
And
right.
and I'm sure that maybe there is a supernatural force at work, but until it gets gory, which it doesn't do in the first episode, I am just seeing this as like a young adult coming of age story, and we've seen those a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan, a majority of this episode is Dylan, Spud, and Jordy. They're going to be going to this gig, and they want a lot of people to show up because Judith says that she's going to show. And then Dylan gets in a fight with Cliff.
I don't even think they're going to a gig. I think they're just going to one of their houses, and they're just inviting people to
Right,
come to
but the whole
house.
point was that it wasn't going to have a large turnout.
Not until the quarterback goes missing, and the rumor starts that they are possibly the cause for that.
They have something to do with it, even though.
And the only person who's like really against that idea and thinks it's stupid is the bully of the group, Cliff, and he's the one who really presses Dylan to prove that he is a Satanist by again killing the cat, which he refuses to do. But then he says, "I don't need to prove myself to you. I can prove a different way." And then he slices his hand open.
Yeah, what did you think of that scene?
Which part?
Where he slices his hand.
I found it predictable.
So you knew that once he didn't kill the cat that he was going to actually hurt himself?
No, but after his girlfriend looked at him and said, "You're not," or like kind of communicated that she wasn't as enticed by him, he had to do something at that point. And so I think that's about as far as he's going to go, though, because by the end of the episode, he gets arrested by the cops. And so now the cops are going to have to take a more serious look because they see that there's been a murder in town and also that this guy's hand is all cut up. The interesting thing about Faith, though, the girl who goes missing at the beginning, she returns home. We learn that her mom is, in fact, the Anna Camp
Tracy.
Yeah, character. And she doesn't seem all that surprised that her daughter was missing. She went to the school giving a strep throat excuse for why her daughter wasn't in class. She didn't come out and say she's been kidnapped.
Right.
So that makes me think that maybe this is all because maybe she had her own daughter kidnapped because she realized that her daughter was sleeping around and she's highly religious or something.
Well, I mean, we even see it when she's talking to a different parent about like even the Smurfs TV show. She says how they're really promoting satanic morals.
Beelzebub.
Yeah, Beelzebub, Thundercats, how that's promoting bestiality. And that's what I'm saying. I think that when it came to the acting, like Anna Camp with being evil or Julie Bowen or even Bruce Campbell for the one scene that he's in, I wish he was in more of it. I thought that the acting was done pretty well.
Julie Bowen, her character is supposed to be on the side of her kid at the very beginning. She's like, "I do like your music, but I do agree with your father. You should be outside more." And then it's not until I think he straight up breaks the rule and she like grounds him because he's lied to her about this concert that he's going to before she really starts to flip out. And whatever's happening to her at the end of the first episode, that's the real cliffhanger that like if it plays out well enough, it could make the entire show better. But if it turns out in the second episode that she's just, imagining things or that like it would be funny if she was possessed for the rest of the series. But do you really think that's where they're going to go with it?
Well, I mean, I think that, yeah, because otherwise I don't see where the other 7 episodes are going to go. I thought that this had like a ton of fake outs as to where the ending was going to happen. That's actually one of my cons for this series. Yeah, because the first time I thought we would get a cliffhanger with Dylan being handed the cat and it was going to be like, is he going to hurt it or not? Or even when he dropped in, the cat ran away, I thought that's where the episode was going to end. Then no. The second time I thought when he sliced his palm, that's where the episode was going to end. No. The third time I thought was when Linda Linda was actually being possessed or whatever was happening to her. I thought that was like for sure the absolute end to it, and then it wasn't there. It kept going and going and going. And but I do like the cliffhanger that they left.
I mean, Dylan coming home and trashing all the drum set that he has in his house and everything downstairs. That also felt a little over dramatic. I'm the guy worked a long time on this series, so I think he knows where he's going with it. His name is Matthew Scott Kane, and he wrote the teaser for this back in 2017. It actually went through the pandemic. He wrote more of it at that point, but then it got passed on by a lot of networks. Then Peacock came back and said, hey, how about you repitch this to us? He's worked before on American Horror Story, I think, and then also It's Always Sunny. I think those are his
Wow, those are two very different shows.
They teamed him up with the showrunner David A. Goodman, who's worked on Family Guy, The Golden Girls, Futurama, The Orville, a lot of Seth MacFarlane shows, but also wrote Fred and Fred 2.
Well, now I understand why it's on Peacock, because you were just saying FX series,
Yes.
but all those are NBC shows.
That's a good connection. Also, when he was writing this, apparently the script made its way to his alumni school in University of Michigan, and so that was the script that they would use in like acting classes.
Interesting.
And so 90% of that script ended up making its way into the first episode. So the dialogue's been passed around a lot for this thing. It does feel like the third of the Jordy was a cool character. I think she's probably my favorite of his little crew. I think the guy's character outside, what's his name again? Spud. I think he's underdeveloped. Like, I just didn't really leave with any impression of the guy. He dresses up as a zebra. That's about it.
Underneath my pros and cons, because I do have Spud as a con here, but I want to say the pros I had. The first scene, there was a lot of acting that I thought was good. This is supernatural forces. I think will probably add a point to my score. There's a lot of questions. Obviously, what happened with Faith? Why is Judith so interested in Dylan? Is there a real satanic cult in Happy Hollow? What happened to Ryan's body before he was found? I like how there's a lot of things that you can kind of speculate on, even though I know the whole series is out, and there's a lot going on. But underneath my cons, I thought that it started off with a great homage to 80s films, kind of lost its way. There was too many endings. We got so little Bruce Campbell, even though he's on the poster. It felt like they daredeviled us with what happened in Echo, because he barely shows up, and even when he does, it says like special guest star Bruce Campbell.
In the first episode of Stranger Things, the guy wasn't in a big part. David Harbour's character wasn't in, but
he wasn't also a special guest star. Like, why is Bruce Campbell have such a small role in this series?
They literally use his last name as the main character's last name. I think the fact that they got him was a real get. And so I'm not surprised that he doesn't have to appear in the first episode all that much, as long as in the next few he's arrested Dylan. Now it's going to be all about him and the preacher. And there's also another main character who we didn't get to see at all, who's played by the Reverend Garrett Dillahunt, who's been in a ton of stuff before. Raising Hope is like his main claim thing. But like, yeah, I'm not super surprised by that.
I don't hate Dylan being the main character, but I wish the story was wider. I wish we were focusing on more than just his family and his friends. I kind of wanted it to be about the whole entire town, almost like follow the same thing as Salem's Lot, the film that came out like 2 weeks ago, where it was like, we got a good representation of the whole town. And Dylan can be the main character, but I wish that they just kind of covered more ground with it, because I agree with you. Characters like Spud, who was probably like my least favorite character, it's like, why is he in the show? What's the point of him even being there?
All right. What do you end up giving this?
I will give it a 6 out of 10, because I don't think this is going to convert any fans or people that don't like horror shows, but I think that it definitely has enough intrigue where I can understand why people would like it. So 6 out of 10, it does pass for me.
Did you end up liking Goosebumps when you watched that series?
The movie? The series or the movie?
The series.
The series I liked, yeah. But I watched it when I was so young. I thought that there was some...
the one we did like 2 years ago.
Oh, that series? Yeah. I also gave that one like a 9 out of 10.
Okay, you gave it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
What was the difference?
Between this and Goosebumps?
Yeah, so think about it. Like, the teacher at the end of that episode gets possessed.
Yeah.
Linda at the end of this episode gets possessed. It has to deal with a bunch of kids. Some of them are outcasts. Random stuff is happening.
Goosebumps was a case by week show or monster by week show.
Which one do you think is more violent between the two?
This one.
This one?
Yeah.
I guess there's this like more sex going on because it's more geared, I guess, towards an older audience, but it just doesn't feel like that's where I was going after the tameness angle again. I just don't think that there's much of a differentiation.
Well, that's why I also even put in School Spirits, because I understand what you mean about being tame. One of my biggest problems with that show was I felt like it was also too tame. Like it didn't really lean into its horror aspect.
I just say like the plot didn't. It feels interesting. So like personally, it feels like Peacock keeps on throwing darts at a dartboard, and sometimes they get pretty close to like a really good show based on a true story. Teacup, Mrs. Davis, Brave New World, Fight Night, Those About to Die, Hysteria. Like they're either completely off the board or they're pretty close, but they've never hit a bullseye. Like ever. And I wouldn't include this on that either. And Poker Face, I would say, is probably the closest they've ever gotten to a really, really solid show. But I'm basing that off of one episode that I saw.
Ted had a 7.9 on IMDb, the overall series.
That's right. I didn't include Ted. I mean, I would say that for if you're comparing it to the movie, that it satisfied that. But you take the episode where like the truck.
That was the weakest one, but that was the penultimate episode.
Yeah, they just haven't had that HBO Succession, Netflix Stranger Things, like the big moment show.
I still agree with you where it's like out of all the streaming things that there are out, the big ones like Stars, Hulu, all that stuff, I think Peacock is still on the lower tier of all those.
Yeah, maybe it'll change one day. 7.3 on IMDb, 67% on Rotten Tomatoes. Both Decider and Time liked it a lot. IndieWire said for the most part, Hysteria threads multiple genres with tight precision. Hollywood Reporter said it was messy, difficult to describe, but they did give props to Kane for being ambitious, not going they said they could have wrapped this up tightly in a bow, made everything kind of like more predictable, and they probably would have reached more of an audience that way. And then Roger Ebert just said hammy acting and gave a negative.
What would you give this episode out of 10?
I like the first scene. Had they maintained what they had in those first 5 minutes, I probably would have given it a high review. As seeing the rest of the show and thinking this is just going to be another one of many high school young adult, he's going to fall in love and then fall in love with someone else.
Right.
Like it doesn't appeal to me. So 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. Okay.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.